You know what they say about being careful what you wish for. Well, my family should have been more careful about what they said behind my back. Because when a federal judge discovers she's been played for 25 years, the verdict isn't going to be pretty. My name is Victoria Sterling, I'm 62 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had the most loving, grateful family in Chicago. I've been a federal judge for 18 years, earned my position through pure grit and intelligence, and built a career that most people only dream of. My annual salary? $450,000, plus investments that have grown my net worth to over $8 million. Not bad for a girl who grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment on the South Side, sharing a room with my younger brother Marcus until I was 16. But here's what I didn't know until that devastating night at Giovanni's restaurant. My entire family saw me as nothing more than their personal ATM. And the worst part? My own son Michael was in on it. Let me paint you the picture of that night that changed everything. It was supposed to be a celebration dinner for my nephew Tommy's engagement to his fiancée Sarah. Tommy is my brother Marcus's eldest son, and I've been financing his life since he was 18 years old. College tuition at Northwestern University? I paid every single penny of the $68,000 over 4 years, plus room and board that added another $42,000. His downtown loft in River North? I fronted the down payment of $85,000 and co-signed the mortgage because his credit wasn't established yet. Even his engagement ring, a 4-carat princess-cut diamond that cost $32,000 from Tiffany & Company, came courtesy of Aunt Victoria's generosity. I remember driving him to the jewelry store, watching his face light up as he picked out the ring, feeling so proud that I could make his dreams come true. I had arrived at Giovanni's restaurant 15 minutes early, as always. Punctuality is a virtue I learned early in my career. Showing up late in federal court is not an option, and the habit carried over into every aspect of my life. The hostess, a young woman named Maria who recognized me from my previous visits, seated me at our reserved table in the private dining room I'd specifically requested and paid extra for. I wanted Tommy's engagement celebration to be perfect, memorable, special. I was reviewing some case files on my tablet, a complex securities fraud case that required my attention over the weekend, when I heard the familiar sound of my family's laughter echoing from the bar area near the restaurant's entrance. My family had arrived, but they hadn't seen me yet. The private dining room was tucked away from the main restaurant, giving them privacy to gather at the bar for drinks before dinner. I smiled to myself, imagining how happy they all seemed, how grateful they must be for another family celebration that I was making possible. I was about to get up and join them when I heard my brother Marcus's voice carry clearly through the restaurant's acoustic design. God, I hope Victoria doesn't go into one of her lectures tonight, he was saying, his voice dripping with the kind of disdain I'd never heard from him before. You know how she gets when she's trying to act like the family matriarch. All high and mighty because she wears a black robe to work. I froze in my chair, my tablet slipping from suddenly nerveless fingers. This couldn't be Marcus talking about me. Marcus, who called me every week to chat, who brought his kids to my house for Sunday dinners, who had tearfully thanked me just 6 months ago when I helped him through his business's rough patch with a $50,000 loan that we both knew he'd never repay. My mother's voice cut through the air like a knife through my heart. Oh honey, you know how she is. Still trying to buy our love because she couldn't keep a husband or have a normal family life. Divorced at 45, never remarried, just her and that boy of hers. It's actually kind of pathetic when you think about it. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing become shallow. My divorce had been devastating. My ex-husband Richard had cheated with his secretary, a cliché so embarrassing that I'd never told my family the real reason we split. I'd simply said we grew apart, that our careers took us in different directions. My family had been so supportive during that time, or so I thought. My mother had made me countless dinners, Marcus had helped me move into my new condo, Rebecca had listened to me cry for hours on the phone. At least she's useful, my sister-in-law Janet chimed in, her voice carrying the particular tone of smugness that I now realized I'd been hearing for years without recognizing it. Where else would we find someone stupid enough to throw money at us without asking questions? She just writes check after check, like she's trying to prove something to herself. My sister Rebecca's laugh joined the conversation, and the sound made my blood run cold. Remember when she paid for my entire divorce? $45,000 in legal fees, just like that. She didn't even ask to see the bills or question why it was taking so long. My lawyer was amazed. He said most people scrutinize every charge, but Victoria just said whatever Rebecca needs to be free and happy. And the best part, Marcus continued, is that she acts like she's doing it out of pure generosity. Like she doesn't expect anything in return. But you can see it in her eyes, she's keeping score of every dollar, waiting for us to be grateful enough to make up for how empty her life is. But it was my son Michael's voice that shattered my heart completely, destroying everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. Look guys, I know she's my mom, but let's be honest, if she wasn't loaded, would any of us really want to spend time with her? She's uptight, she's judgmental, she acts like her money makes her better than everyone else, and she has this way of making everything about her career and her accomplishments. Like, we get it, you're a federal judge. You don't have to remind us every 5 minutes. The conversation continued around me, but I was no longer present in that restaurant. I was somewhere else entirely, somewhere cold and calculating and completely separate from the woman who had walked into Giovanni's 20 minutes earlier, expecting to celebrate her nephew's happiness. I was floating above my life, looking down at 25 years of what I had believed was love, generosity, and family loyalty, seeing it now through the lens of devastating clarity. My mind began working the way it did in court when presented with evidence that changed the entire trajectory of a case. I was calculating, remembering, adding up not just the money I'd spent, but every birthday dinner I'd hosted, every holiday celebration I'd organized and funded, every family vacation I'd planned and paid for while declining to take vacations of my own because family comes first. The engagement party continued around me, but I was building a case. 25 years of birthdays, Christmas gifts, emergency loans, college tuitions, down payments, medical bills, car repairs, business investments, and family vacations. Every single expense flashed through my mind like evidence being presented in court, and the pattern that emerged was damning. My parents' house, the 4-bedroom colonial in Oak Park that they'd been living in rent-free for 15 years. I bought it outright for $420,000 in 2008 when Dad lost his job at the manufacturing plant where he'd worked for 30 years. I remember sitting at their kitchen table, surrounded by foreclosure notices and bills they couldn't pay, writing that check and telling them it was a gift, that they deserved security in their retirement years. The deed was still in my name because it had been easier for tax purposes, but they'd been telling their neighbors for years that they owned it free and clear, that they'd worked hard and saved carefully to afford such a beautiful home in their golden years. Marcus's business, Sterling Consulting Group. I had invested $350,000 to get his consulting firm off the ground in 2015, when he'd been laid off from his corporate job. I'd believed in his vision, his intelligence, his potential to build something meaningful. He'd presented me with a business plan, projections, dreams of building a company that could provide for his family and create jobs for others. I'd written that check proudly, telling him I was investing in his future, in our family's legacy. For 8 years, he'd been taking credit for his business acumen and entrepreneurial spirit, appearing in local business magazines and networking events as a self-made success story. He'd never once mentioned that his sister's money had made it all possible. My sister Rebecca's divorce, an 18-month nightmare that had cost me $45,000 in legal fees and another $100,000 in temporary support to help her get back on her feet. I'd watched her husband Tom slowly destroy her self-esteem over 12 years of marriage, watched her shrink into herself until she was afraid to make decisions about her own life. When she finally found the courage to leave, I'd been there with my checkbook and my support, telling her that money was nothing compared to her happiness and freedom. She'd been posting on Facebook for 3 years about her independent journey, and how proud she was of rebuilding her life on her own terms, accepting congratulations from friends who admired her strength and self-reliance. And Michael, my brilliant, handsome son who had graduated from Harvard Law School thanks to the $200,000 I'd spent on his education, not including the additional $50,000 for living expenses during his 3 years in Cambridge. The son who lived in a Lincoln Park condo that I'd purchased for him, $680,000, because I wanted him to start his career without the burden of student loans or rent payments. The son who drove a BMW that I'd bought him for his law school graduation, who wore $1,000 suits that I'd helped him purchase for job interviews, who had been telling his colleagues at the prestigious firm where he worked that he came from old money, and could afford to take principled cases because his family's wealth meant he didn't need to worry about maximizing billable hours. As I sat there in that private dining room, listening to the people I'd loved and supported mock the woman who had made their comfortable lives possible, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. It was the same feeling I got when I was reviewing evidence in a particularly complex case, when all the pieces suddenly clicked together to reveal a pattern of fraud or deception that had been carefully hidden for years. They wanted to see me as their personal bank? Fine. But banks have terms and conditions. Banks charge interest. Banks can foreclose when payments aren't made. And judges? Well, judges know exactly how to make verdicts stick. I slipped out of the restaurant through a side exit before they noticed I was there. I told Maria at the front desk that I'd received an emergency call and needed to reschedule our dinner, that I'd call tomorrow to arrange payment for the private room and the inconvenience. She looked concerned and asked if everything was okay, and I realized that a restaurant hostess I barely knew was showing me more genuine concern than my own family had shown in years. The valet brought my Mercedes, the S-Class sedan that I'd purchased with my own money, earned through my own hard work, and I drove through the Chicago streets toward my Lincoln Park penthouse with a strange sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. The city lights blurred past my windows, but my mind was crystal clear, organizing evidence and building the foundation for what would become the most satisfying case of my career. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 as always, but instead of my usual routine of reviewing case files over coffee, I did what I do best when faced with a complex legal challenge. I gathered evidence. I spent the entire weekend in my home office, a room I designed specifically for the kind of detailed legal work that required absolute concentration. 25 years of bank statements, canceled checks, wire transfers, loan documents, investment records, tax returns, and correspondence spread across my mahogany desk and the conference table I'd installed for particularly complex cases. It looked like the discovery phase of a major litigation, which in many ways, it was. The evidence was comprehensive, irrefutable, and absolutely devastating. I'm a federal judge, I know how to build an airtight case, and this one practically built itself. Total amount spent on family over 25 years, $2,763,412. That figure didn't include the countless dinners at expensive restaurants, the designer gifts, the spontaneous emergencies I'd handled with cash over the years, or the opportunity costs of the vacations I'd never taken, the investments I'd never made, the experiences I'd foregone because my family's needs always came first. Marcus alone had cost me over $800,000. The business investment was just the beginning. There were the private school tuitions for his 3 children, $15,000 per year per child for 10 years. The family vacation to Europe in 2018 that I'd paid for as a surprise gift, $38,000 for flights, hotels, and expenses for 6 people. The mortgage payments I'd covered during his rough patch in 2019 and 2020, $47,000 over 18 months. The new roof on his house, the updated kitchen, the college funds I'd contributed to for his children, even the country club membership I'd bought him as a Christmas gift because he'd mentioned wanting to network with other business owners. And how had he repaid me? By building his reputation as a self-made entrepreneur while carefully omitting any mention of where his startup capital had originated. By positioning himself as the successful brother who'd made it on his own merits while his sister remained stuck in her government job. By telling anyone who would listen that success came from hard work and smart decisions, not handouts from family members. My parents had received over $600,000 from me over the years. Not just the house, but a complete renovation in 2016 that had cost $68,000. A new car when Dad's broke down, $22,000 for a sensible Honda that would be reliable for their retirement years. Medical bills that Medicare hadn't covered, including Mom's hip replacement surgery and Dad's cardiac procedures, $43,000 over 3 years. Property taxes, homeowners insurance, utilities during the months when their fixed income wasn't quite enough, home repairs, landscaping, even a new heating and air conditioning system that had cost $18,000. They'd been telling their retirement community friends that they were financially independent, that they'd worked hard and saved carefully throughout their careers, that they were proud of never being a burden on their children. Dad had even given a speech at his retirement dinner about the importance of financial planning and living within your means. Rebecca's divorce and subsequent life reconstruction had cost me nearly $400,000. Legal fees were just the beginning. There was the temporary apartment I'd rented for her during the separation, $24,000 for a year-long lease in a safe neighborhood with good schools for her daughter Emma. The car I'd bought her when her husband kept theirs in the divorce, $18,000 for a reliable SUV. The furniture and household goods she'd needed to start over, $12,000 for basics that would make her new place feel like home. Monthly support for 3 years while she went back to school to get her nursing degree, $60,000 total, plus another $35,000 for tuition and books. She'd been posting inspirational quotes on Instagram about independence and self-reliance, sharing her journey with followers who admired her strength and determination. She'd been interviewed by a local magazine about single mothers who'd rebuilt their lives after divorce, positioning herself as an example of what was possible with hard work and determination. She'd never mentioned that her sister's financial support had made her transformation possible. And Michael. My son had cost me over $500,000 beyond normal child-rearing expenses, and every dollar had been an investment in what I believed was his future success and happiness. Harvard Law School tuition and expenses, $250,000 over 3 years. The Lincoln Park condo, $680,000, purchased outright so he could build equity instead of paying rent. The BMW, $47,000 as a graduation gift. Professional wardrobe for job interviews and court appearances, $15,000 over 2 years. Bar exam preparation course, fees, and related expenses, $8,000. Even smaller things that had added up over time, the expensive dinners when he was stressed about school, the weekend getaways I'd funded when he needed to relax, the networking events and professional conferences I'd paid for to help him build his career. He'd been telling his colleagues at Morrison, Klein & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms, that he came from established wealth, that his family's financial stability allowed him to choose cases based on their merit rather than their profitability. He'd been building his reputation as an idealistic young attorney who could afford to take on pro bono work because he didn't need to maximize his income. Partners at the firm had commented on his admirable commitment to justice over financial gain, not knowing that his ability to be selective was entirely funded by his mother's sacrifices. The pattern was clear, comprehensive, and damning. I wasn't their beloved Victoria who happened to be generous. I wasn't the successful family member who wanted to share her good fortune. I was their Mark. Their fool. Their personal ATM with an unlimited balance and apparently no self-respect or basic intelligence. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated exactly who they were dealing with, and more importantly, they had underestimated what I was capable of when I finally understood the truth about our relationships. I spent the next 3 days making phone calls and activating professional relationships I'd built over 18 years on the federal bench. You see, when you're a judge, especially a federal judge with a reputation for fairness and intelligence, you know a lot of very powerful people. Lawyers who respect your judgment, accountants who trust your integrity, private investigators who value your discretion, and financial advisors who owe you favors from years of fair rulings and professional courtesy. My first call was to Patricia Hernandez, the best forensic accountant in Chicago and a woman whose expertise had been crucial in several complex financial fraud cases I'd overseen. Patricia, I need a complete financial analysis of my extended family's assets and liabilities, specifically focusing on wealth that can be traced back to my contributions. I need to understand the full scope of my financial impact on their lives. Patricia's voice carried the professional curiosity that had made her so effective in court. Victoria, this sounds like a complex family situation. How detailed do you want this analysis to be? I want to know everything, Patricia. Property values, business assets, investment accounts, debt levels, credit scores. I want to understand their complete financial pictures and exactly how much of their apparent success is built on my money. My second call was to David Chun, a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud cases and had worked on several high-profile investigations that had come through my court. David, I need to know exactly how my family has been representing their financial situations to others. Social media posts, loan applications, business networking events, interviews, any public statements about their success or independence. I want to understand the stories they've been telling about themselves. David's response was immediate and professional. How far back do you want me to go, and how comprehensive should this be? 25 years if possible, but focus especially on the last 10. I want to know every instance where they've taken credit for success that was actually funded by my money. Every lie, every misrepresentation, every time they've positioned themselves as self-made when they were actually dependent on my support. My third call was to Jonathan Walsh, my personal attorney and one of the most respected estate planning lawyers in Illinois. Jonathan had handled my divorce, my will, and various other legal matters over the years. Jonathan, I need you to review every informal loan and gift I've given to my family members over the past 25 years. What can be legally reclaimed? What are my options for formalizing previous arrangements? And how should I restructure my estate planning given some new information about family dynamics? Jonathan's voice carried a note of concern. Victoria, this sounds like something significant has happened. Are you sure you want to pursue legal action against family members? I'm not pursuing action yet, Jonathan. I'm gathering information so I can make informed decisions. But I need to understand my legal position completely. The results came back faster than I had expected, and they were even more damning than I had imagined possible. Patricia's forensic analysis was thorough and devastating. My family's combined assets totaled over $4 million, with 78% of that wealth directly traceable to my contributions. They were living like millionaires on my dime while maintaining elaborate facades of self-made success. Marcus's business was valued at $1.2 million, but without my initial investment and ongoing support, it would never have survived its first year. Rebecca's assets included her house, car, and savings account, all of which existed because of my financial support during and after her divorce. My parents' comfortable retirement was entirely dependent on the house I'd bought them and the ongoing support I provided for medical expenses and maintenance costs. But the most shocking revelation was about Michael. His condo had appreciated significantly since I'd purchased it, and combined with his salary and investment accounts, his net worth was approaching $800,000. For a 30-year-old attorney, this was exceptional wealth, except none of it was actually his. Every dollar could be traced back to my support, from his education to his housing to the professional development opportunities that had landed him his prestigious job. David's investigation uncovered a web of lies and misrepresentations that made my stomach turn. The evidence was comprehensive and damning: social media posts, recorded conversations, business loan applications, networking event speeches, and interviews with local business publications. Marcus had been featured in Chicago Business Journal as a self-made entrepreneur who had built his consulting firm from the ground up. The article quoted him extensively about the importance of taking calculated risks and believing in yourself, with no mention of the sister who had provided the capital that made his risks possible. He'd applied for several business loans over the years, listing his company's success and his personal assets without ever disclosing that his initial funding had come from family money. His LinkedIn profile described him as a bootstrap entrepreneur who had turned vision into reality through determination and strategic thinking. Rebecca had been interviewed by a local magazine about successful single mothers, positioning herself as an inspiration to other women facing divorce. She talked about the challenges of starting over and the satisfaction of building a new life through her own efforts. The article mentioned her nursing degree and her beautiful home, presenting them as symbols of what was possible through hard work and determination. Her Facebook and Instagram posts were filled with inspirational quotes about independence and self-reliance, with photos of her house, car, and lifestyle that suggested financial stability achieved through her own efforts. My parents had been telling their retirement community friends for years that they were financially independent, that they'd worked hard and saved carefully throughout their careers. Dad had given several speeches at community events about financial planning and the importance of living within your means. They'd been featured in their neighborhood newsletter as an example of successful aging, with Mom quoted as saying, "We're proud that we've never had to be a burden on our children. Good planning when you're young pays off when you're older." But Michael's lies were the most painful to discover. He'd been telling his colleagues at Morrison, Klein & Associates that he came from old money, that his family's established wealth allowed him to choose cases based on their merit rather than their profitability. He'd positioned himself as an idealistic young attorney who could afford to take on challenging pro bono work because he didn't need to maximize his billable hours to pay off student loans or cover living expenses. Several partners at the firm had commented in professional publications about Michael's admirable commitment to justice over financial gain, praising his ability to maintain his principles because of his secure financial background. He'd been featured in the Illinois State Bar Association magazine as an example of young attorneys who were using their privilege to serve the community. The article quoted him talking about the responsibility that comes with financial security and his commitment to using his advantages to help those who were less fortunate. Reading those quotes, knowing they were built on a foundation of lies about money that came entirely from my sacrifices, made me physically ill. Jonathan's legal analysis was the final piece I needed to understand my options completely. While gifts couldn't be reclaimed under normal circumstances, loans could be called in, especially when there was documentation supporting the temporary nature of the financial support. Over the years, I've been careful to document many of my financial contributions as loans rather than gifts, partly for tax purposes and partly out of good legal habits. It was a practice that was about to serve me very well. Outstanding loans that could be legally collected totaled $837,000. All were documented with signed agreements, email confirmations, or other forms of written acknowledgement. All were legally enforceable, and all could be called in immediately if I chose to accelerate the payment terms. But money wasn't the only weapon in my arsenal. 25 years as a federal judge had taught me that the most effective verdicts aren't always about financial penalties. Sometimes the most devastating punishment is simply the truth, delivered publicly and undeniably. Sometimes justice isn't about money, it's about consequences, accountability, and making sure that people face the reality of their choices. I had 3 weeks until Tommy's wedding at the Chicago Cultural Center, 3 weeks to plan what would become the most satisfying verdict of my career. 3 weeks to design a form of justice that would be proportional to 25 years of exploitation, manipulation, and lies. The first phase of my plan was subtle but immediately effective. I called my financial advisor, Margaret Thompson at Goldman Sachs, and had her restructure my liquid assets in a way that would make spontaneous family emergencies impossible to accommodate quickly. Margaret, I want you to set up automatic investment transfers that will move most of my available cash into 30-day CDs and short-term investment vehicles that require advanced planning to access. Margaret's voice carried professional curiosity. Victoria, this is a fairly significant change in your usual approach to liquidity. Is there something specific you're planning for? I'm planning for the possibility that I might need to resist some financial pressure in the coming weeks. I want my money to be secure but not immediately accessible for impulse decisions. The second phase involved my estate planning. I scheduled an appointment with Jonathan Walsh for the following week to make some significant changes to my will and trust arrangements. My family was about to learn that their golden goose had been giving serious consideration to her legacy, and they weren't going to like what she decided. The third phase required patience and strategic thinking. I needed to wait for them to approach me with their next request for money, and based on 25 years of experience, I knew it wouldn't take long. My family had grown accustomed to a steady stream of financial support, and they would need to maintain that flow to preserve their comfortable lifestyles and carefully constructed images of success. I was absolutely right. 5 days after my discovery at Giovanni's restaurant, Marcus called me with his usual approach, enthusiastic, confident, and completely oblivious to the fact that everything had changed. Victoria, you are absolutely not going to believe the incredible opportunity that just fell into my lap, he said, his voice practically vibrating with a kind of excitement that I now recognized as calculated manipulation. There's a competitor consulting firm that's going under, poor management, bad business decisions, and I have the chance to buy their entire client list and equipment for just $300,000. It would literally double my revenue overnight and establish Sterling Consulting as the dominant firm in our market segment. In the old days, which is to say, 6 days earlier, I would have asked a few basic questions about cash flow and return on investment, then arranged for the wire transfer before the end of our conversation. I'd done it dozens of times before, always trusting Marcus's business judgment and wanting to support his success. This time, I was ready with questions that I should have been asking for years. That does sound interesting, Marcus. Have you discussed this opportunity with your business partners and gotten their input on the acquisition? There was a pause, just long enough to confirm what I suspected. Well, you know how they are, Victoria. They're pretty conservative when it comes to expansion opportunities. They don't have the vision to see how transformative this could be. I see. And you've exhausted your business credit lines and investigated traditional financing options. Another pause, longer this time. You know how banks are, Victoria. They want extensive paperwork, collateral requirements, personal guarantees. It's a bureaucratic nightmare, and by the time they finish their approval process, this opportunity will be gone. Right. And what about all those profits from your successful consulting business? Surely 18 years of operation have built up some financial reserves that could be used for strategic acquisitions like this. The silence stretched so long that I thought he might have hung up. I could practically hear him scrambling for an explanation that wouldn't reveal the truth about his company's actual financial situation. Finally, he cleared his throat and tried to recover. Well, business has been good, but you know how it is in consulting. Cash flow can be unpredictable, and we've been reinvesting everything back into the business. New equipment, marketing, office improvements. Plus, overhead costs, employee salaries, insurance premiums. It all adds up. Of course it does. So what you're telling me is that you need $300,000 from your sister because your successful, established consulting business doesn't actually have any available capital for growth opportunities. Victoria, what's with the attitude? I thought family helped family. I've always been there for you, and I thought you'd be excited about helping me take the business to the next level. That phrase, family helps family. I'd been hearing it for 25 years, and I was just now realizing that it had only ever flowed in one direction. I was also noticing that Marcus had completely avoided addressing the actual substance of my questions, instead trying to make me feel guilty for asking them. You're absolutely right, Marcus. Family should help family. It's interesting that you mention that principle. Tell me, when was the last time you helped me with anything? What do you mean? I help you all the time. Really? How? The silence was deafening. I counted 15 seconds before he tried to answer. I mean, emotional support. Being there for you when you need someone to talk to. Family stuff. Holiday dinners, birthday celebrations, keeping in touch. Emotional support. You mean like the emotional support you were providing last week at Giovanni's when you were talking about how pathetic it is that I try to buy love because I couldn't keep a husband? The sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Marcus realized, probably for the first time, that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. Victoria, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Let me refresh your memory. Giovanni's restaurant, last Tuesday night, about 7:30. You were all gathered at the bar before Tommy's engagement dinner, having what you thought was a private conversation about your stupid, lonely, pathetic sister who throws money at her family because she's so desperate for affection. The phone went so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was smaller, defensive, scared. Victoria, it wasn't meant like that. People say things when they're frustrated, when they've had a few drinks. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything? Marcus, you called me pathetic. You said I was trying to buy love because my life was empty. You laughed about how stupid I am for giving you money without asking questions. You positioned yourself as the family success story while conveniently forgetting to mention that your success was built on my money. Look, I'm sorry if we hurt your feelings, but you have to understand. No, Marcus. You have to understand. You've been taking my money for 18 years while building a reputation as a self-made entrepreneur. You've been positioning yourself as the successful brother while treating me like an ATM machine. You've been lying to your business associates, your clients, and the community about where your success came from. I could hear him breathing heavily, and I realized he was starting to panic as the full implications of the conversation began to sink in. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice taking on the tone I used when delivering verdicts in federal court. You're going to find another source for your $300,000 opportunity. Because this particular bank is permanently closed to you. Victoria, come on. Don't be like this. We're family. I'm sorry if we hurt your feelings, but we love you. We've always been grateful for everything you've done for us. No, Marcus. You love my money. You love what I can do for you. You love the lifestyle I've provided and the success I've made possible. But you don't love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't mock me behind my back. If you loved me, you wouldn't lie about your success. If you loved me, you would treat me with respect instead of seeing me as a resource to be exploited. That's not fair, Victoria. You're twisting everything around. I'm a federal judge, Marcus. I've spent 18 years listening to people try to justify their behavior when they've been caught doing something wrong. I recognize manipulation when I hear it, and I recognize the truth when I see evidence of it. I paused, letting that sink in. And speaking of evidence, you should know that I've been doing some research into our family's finances. Did you know that you've received over $800,000 from me over the past 18 years? Did you know that 78% of your business assets can be traced directly back to my investment? Did you know that your house, your cars, your children's education, and your comfortable lifestyle exist because of my generosity? The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Here's what else you should know, Marcus. I've discovered that a significant portion of the money you've received from me was documented as loans rather than gifts. Loans that can be called in. Loans that are now due immediately. Victoria, you can't be serious. You can't just. I can, and I will. You're going to receive formal legal notice tomorrow morning. Outstanding debt in the amount of $263,000, due within 30 days. I don't have that kind of money. Then you'll need to figure something out. Maybe you can apply for a business loan based on your company's strong financial position. Oh wait, your company doesn't actually have a strong financial position because it's been dependent on me since day one. I hung up the phone and immediately called Jonathan Walsh. Jonathan, I want you to send formal loan acceleration notices to every family member who has outstanding debt to me. Full payment required within 30 days. Victoria, are you absolutely sure about this? Once we send these notices, there's no returning to informal family financial arrangements. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Jonathan. And I want to schedule an appointment for next week to make some significant changes to my will and trust arrangements. Of course. Victoria, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly happened to precipitate this decision? I discovered the truth about my family, Jonathan. And the truth, it turns out, is something I should have investigated years ago. 2 days later, my phone started ringing non-stop. First Marcus, then Rebecca, then my parents, then Michael. Voice message after voice message, each one more desperate than the last. All of them suddenly wanted to have lunch, to talk, to work things out, and clear up any misunderstandings. I didn't answer any of the calls. Instead, I listened to each voicemail with a detached interest of a judge reviewing evidence, taking notes on the evolution of their panic as the reality of their situation began to sink in. Marcus's first message was angry and defensive. Victoria, I can't believe you're being so dramatic about this. We're family, for God's sake. You can't just cut us off because your feelings got hurt. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults. His second message, 12 hours later, was more conciliatory. Victoria, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I realize I may have said some things that were hurtful. I was under a lot of stress, and sometimes people say things they don't mean. Can we please talk about this? His third message, the next morning after receiving Jonathan's formal legal notice, was pure panic. Victoria, this legal notice can't be serious. You can't actually expect me to pay back $263,000 in 30 days. That's impossible. Please call me. We need to figure this out. Rebecca's progression was even more revealing. Her first message tried to position herself as the innocent victim. Victoria, Marcus told me about your phone call, and I'm so confused. I don't understand why you're upset with all of us. I thought we had a good relationship. Please call me back. Her second message, after receiving her own legal notice for $147,000, was desperate. Victoria, I got this legal document, and I don't understand what's happening. You know I can't pay this kind of money. I'm a single mother, I'm still building my nursing career. Please don't do this to me. I thought you loved me. My parents' messages were perhaps the most manipulative of all. Mom's voice was shaky and confused. Victoria, sweetheart, we're so worried about you. Marcus says you're upset about something that happened at dinner last week, but we don't remember saying anything hurtful. You know how much we love you, honey. You're our successful daughter, and we're so proud of everything you've accomplished. Dad's message tried a different approach. Victoria, your mother is crying, and I'm concerned about your health. This doesn't sound like you at all. Maybe you're working too hard, maybe the stress of your job is getting to you. We think you should see a doctor, maybe take some time off. Family is forever, sweetheart. Don't let whatever this is destroy what we have. But Michael's messages broke my heart all over again, because even in his panic, I could hear the entitled, manipulative person he'd become rather than the son I'd raised. His first message was confusion mixed with arrogance. Mom, I don't know what's going on with you and Uncle Marcus, but you need to calm down. You're being completely irrational. We're your family, and we love you. Call me back so I can help you work through whatever this is. His second message, after receiving his own legal notice for $379,000, revealed his true priorities. Mom, this legal notice is insane. You can't actually expect me to pay back almost $400,000. That would destroy my credit, my career, my entire future. I'm your son. You can't do this to your own child. His third message was the one that confirmed everything I'd suspected about who he really was. Mom, if this is some kind of lesson you're trying to teach us, fine, you've made your point. We get it. We should have been more grateful. We should have said thank you more often. But enough is enough. You're destroying relationships over hurt feelings, and that's not fair to any of us. You chose to help us. Nobody forced you to give us money. You can't change the rules now just because you're feeling unappreciated. I saved every single voicemail as evidence for what was coming next. Instead of responding to their calls, I spent my time finalizing Phase 4 of my plan, the public revelation that would serve as my final verdict on 25 years of exploitation and lies. Tommy's wedding was going to be held at the Chicago Cultural Center, one of the most prestigious venues in the city. The ceremony would take place in Preston Bradley Hall, with its stunning Tiffany dome and marble columns, followed by a reception in the Sidney Yates Gallery. 200 guests would be attending, including extended family, friends, colleagues from Marcus's business world, Rebecca's nursing school classmates, my parents' retirement community friends, and Michael's law firm associates. It was going to be elegant, traditional, expensive, and very, very public. Perfect for what I had planned. I RSVP'd that I would attend alone, declining to bring a guest as I usually did to family events. I also volunteered to give a speech during the reception, something that surprised no one since I'd spoken at every major family celebration for the past 20 years. What they didn't know was that this speech was going to be very different from my usual warm, congratulatory remarks. The week before the wedding, my family's panic reached a crescendo of desperation and manipulation that would have been almost comical if it hadn't been so revealing of their true characters. Michael showed up at my Lincoln Park penthouse unannounced on Wednesday evening, using the key I'd given him years ago. I was in my home office, reviewing the presentation I'd been preparing for Saturday's reception, when I heard the elevator open in my private lobby. "Mom, we need to talk." I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been fine-tuning the timing and flow of what would become the most important speech of my life. "Hello, Michael. I wasn't expecting you." "Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting to get a legal notice saying I owe you $379,000 either." He sat down across from my desk without being invited, and I noticed that he looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my lap to read bedtime stories, who would come running to me when he had nightmares, who used to tell me I was the best mom in the world. Then I remembered him standing at Giovanni's bar, laughing with his uncles about how pathetic his mother was, and the moment of maternal sympathy passed. Funny thing about loans, Michael. They're meant to be repaid eventually. Mom, you know I can't pay that kind of money. You know I don't have it. You have assets worth almost $800,000. Your condo alone has appreciated to over $750,000. You have investment accounts, savings, your BMW. Liquidating your assets would more than cover your debt to me. You want me to sell my home? The condo you bought for me? I want you to take responsibility for money you borrowed and agreed to repay. He leaned forward, and I could see him shifting into lawyer mode, preparing to make his case like he would for any other client. Mom, I know you heard us at the restaurant. I know that's what this is really about. This is about accountability, Michael. This is about consequences for choices you've made over many years. Look, I'm sorry about what I said. We all are. But you have to understand, it gets frustrating sometimes. I set down my pen and gave him my full attention. What gets frustrating, Michael? The way you're always so controlling with your money. Like you're keeping score of everything you do for us, waiting for us to be grateful enough to meet your standards. I stared at my son, this 30-year-old man I'd raised and educated and launched into the world, and realized I was looking at a stranger who happened to share my DNA. I was keeping score, Michael. You're absolutely right about that. Would you like to know what the final tally is? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but his lawyer training kept him focused on his argument. Mom, you didn't have to do any of those things for us. Nobody asked you to pay for my education or buy me a condo or support my lifestyle. You chose to do those things. The words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they revealed how completely he'd missed the point of everything I'd done for him. You're right, Michael. I chose to do those things. I chose to sacrifice my own comfort and financial security because I thought I was investing in a relationship with someone who loved me. We do love you, Mom. No, Michael. You love what I can do for you. You love the lifestyle I've provided. You love not having student loans or rent payments or financial stress. But you don't love me. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. On the screen was the comprehensive financial analysis Patricia Hernandez had prepared, showing every dollar I'd spent on our family over 25 years. This is what love looks like when it's measured in actions instead of words, Michael. $2,763,412. That's how much I loved all of you. He looked at the spreadsheet, and I watched his face change as the magnitude of the numbers sank in. His portion alone was over $500,000, more than most people earn in 10 years. And this, I said, opening another document, is what your love has looked like. It was the transcript David Chun had compiled from social media posts, recorded conversations, and statements from mutual acquaintances. 25 years of my family talking about me behind my back, calling me pathetic, desperate, lonely, controlling, bitter. Every cruel comment, every dismissive remark, every instance where they positioned my generosity as neediness or portrayed my success as somehow lesser than theirs. Michael read in silence, his face growing paler with each entry. When he reached the section containing his own words from Giovanni's restaurant, I saw him physically recoil. Mom, I didn't mean. Don't. Just don't, Michael. You're a lawyer. You understand the value of evidence. The evidence is comprehensive, and it's damning, and it speaks for itself. What do you want from me? What do you want from all of us? I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a warm maternal smile. It was the smile I wore when delivering a verdict that would change someone's life forever. I don't want anything from you anymore, Michael. That's the point. For 25 years, I wanted your love, your respect, your gratitude. I wanted to feel like my sacrifices meant something to the people I cared about most. But I've learned that you can't buy those things, no matter how much money you spend trying. So what happens now? Now you get to experience what it's like to be truly independent. You get to find out who you really are when you're not living off your mother's generosity. You get to build a life based on your own efforts instead of my support. And if I can't pay back the money? Then you'll face the same consequences that anyone else would face when they default on a legally enforceable debt. Garnished wages, asset seizure, damaged credit. The same consequences that people without wealthy mothers face every day. Michael sat in silence for several minutes, and I could see him processing the reality of his situation. Finally, he looked up at me with something that might have been genuine remorse. Is there anything I can do to fix this? Any way to earn your forgiveness? You can start by taking full responsibility for your choices without trying to blame me for being hurt by them. You can acknowledge that you've been lying to your colleagues and friends about your success. You can admit that you've been living a life built on my money while mocking the woman who made it possible. And then you can learn to live without my financial support and see if you're capable of building genuine relationships based on who you are rather than what you can afford. He stood up slowly, like a man who'd just received a devastating medical diagnosis. Mom, I love you. I know you don't believe that right now, but I do. I hope that's true, Michael. But love without respect isn't really love at all. And love that only flows one direction isn't sustainable. Will I see you at Tommy's wedding? I turned back to my laptop, where my speech was waiting to be finalized. Oh, you'll definitely see me at the wedding, Michael. We all have some things to discuss as a family. The morning of Tommy's wedding, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. I'd been carrying the weight of my family's expectations, demands, and ingratitude for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be truly free of those burdens. I chose my outfit with the same care I put into preparing for important court appearances. A stunning navy blue Oscar de la Renta dress that had cost $3,000, the kind of expense I used to feel guilty about when I could have been spending that money on my family instead. Diamond earrings that had been my gift to myself for achieving my appointment to the federal bench, the ones I'd kept hidden in my jewelry box because I didn't want to seem too flashy or successful at family gatherings where I was supposed to be the generous benefactor rather than the accomplished professional. For the first time in decades, I was dressing to impress myself rather than to avoid making my family feel inadequate. I spent an extra hour on my hair and makeup, not because I wanted to look beautiful for the wedding, but because I wanted to look confident and powerful for what was coming. This was my day, my moment, my final verdict on 25 years of being taken for granted. The Chicago Cultural Center was magnificent, decorated in white and gold with flowers that probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. I knew because I'd seen the budget when Tommy had asked me to contribute to the wedding costs 3 months earlier. In a moment of what I now recognized as weakness, I'd agreed to cover the flowers and photography, $12,000 that Tommy had been planning to take credit for as part of his successful family's wedding celebration. I arrived precisely on time, neither early nor late, and took my assigned seat at the family table in the front section of Preston Bradley Hall. The Tiffany dome above us caught the afternoon sunlight, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that seemed almost prophetic. Today was going to be a day of revelations, of truth coming to light in the most spectacular way possible. One by one, my family members arrived, each of them shooting nervous glances in my direction. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually confident demeanor replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Rebecca kept checking her phone nervously, as if expecting another legal notice to materialize. My parents seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of secrets they could no longer hide behind polite family facades. Michael was the last family member to arrive, slipping into the seat next to me just as the string quartet began playing the processional music. He was impeccably dressed as always, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he was avoiding eye contact with other family members who were equally uncomfortable. "Mom," he whispered as the wedding party began their entrance, "please don't do anything you'll regret." I turned to look at my son, this person I'd created and shaped and launched into the world, and felt a profound sense of clarity about what was about to happen. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered back, "the only thing I regret is waiting so long to do this." The ceremony was genuinely beautiful. Tommy and Sarah exchanged vows that brought tears to my eyes, not because of the romance, though they were clearly deeply in love, but because I recognized the innocence and hope in their faces. They actually believed in the promises they were making to each other. They had no idea they were surrounded by people who had turned family relationships into financial transactions, who had perverted the very concept of love into something conditional and exploitative. Watching them promise to support each other through good times and bad, to be honest and faithful and true, I felt a strange sense of peace about what I was going to do. These young people deserved better than the example my family had been setting. They deserved to understand what real commitment looked like, even if that understanding came through witnessing the consequences of its absence. When the ceremony ended and guests began moving toward the Sidney Yates Gallery for the reception, I was approached by several people I didn't recognize, friends of Tommy and Sarah, colleagues of Marcus, people who knew me only by reputation as the successful federal judge who was so generous with her family. "Judge Sterling, it's such an honor to meet you," said a young woman who introduced herself as one of Sarah's law school classmates. "Tommy talks about you all the time. He says you're the reason he was able to focus on his studies instead of worrying about money. That kind of family support is so rare and special." I smiled and thanked her, thinking about how different this conversation was going to be in about 2 hours. A middle-aged man who turned out to be one of Marcus's business associates approached me during cocktails. "Judge Sterling, Marcus has told me so much about you. He's incredibly proud of his self-made success, but he always credits his family's emotional support as being crucial to his achievements. It must be wonderful to have such an accomplished, independent brother." Again, I smiled and made polite conversation, mentally noting how Marcus had carefully crafted his narrative to make himself the hero, while giving me just enough credit to seem gracious without acknowledging the financial foundation of his success. The reception began with dinner, and I ate quietly, listening to the conversations around me. My family was trying desperately to act normal, but the tension was palpable. They knew something was coming, but they had no idea of the scope or severity of what I had planned. After the main course, the speeches began according to the traditional sequence. Tommy's best man told embarrassing stories about college adventures. Sarah's sister shared touching memories about growing up together. The maid of honor made jokes about Sarah's terrible dating history before she met Tommy. Then Marcus stood up to give the traditional father's speech, and I had to grip my water glass to keep from laughing out loud at the audacity of what he was about to say. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Marcus Sterling, Tommy's father and a proud Chicago businessman." He paused for applause, which came enthusiastically from the crowd of 200 guests who had no idea what they were really celebrating. "Looking at my son today, and seeing the beautiful woman he's chosen to marry, I'm filled with pride and gratitude. Tommy has grown into an exceptional young man, and I know that's because he's been surrounded by a family that believes in supporting each other through thick and thin." I nearly choked on my wine. The family support he was referencing included the private school tuition I'd paid, the college expenses I'd covered, and the engagement party I'd funded. "Sarah, welcome to our family. We're not perfect, but we're loyal, and we believe in taking care of each other." Tommy's success, his education, his career, his bright future, is a testament to what's possible when a family works together to lift each other up." The applause was warm and sustained, and I watched Marcus bask in the admiration of people who believed they were witnessing genuine family love and sacrifice. "I want to thank everyone who helped make this day possible," he continued. "The photographers who captured these memories, the florists who created this beautiful setting, the venue staff who made everything perfect. This celebration represents the best of what family can be." He raised his glass in a toast, and 200 people joined him in celebrating a narrative built almost entirely on lies and my money. When the applause died down, the DJ approached the microphone to announce the next portion of the evening's program. "Ladies and gentlemen, Tommy's aunt, the Honorable Victoria Sterling, would like to say a few words." I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress and walking to the microphone with the confidence of someone who'd spent 2 decades addressing courtrooms full of lawyers, defendants, and observers. The room fell into respectful silence as 200 people turned their attention to the distinguished federal judge who was about to address them. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Victoria Sterling, Tommy's aunt and a federal judge here in Chicago." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. "I've been thinking a great deal about family lately. About what it means to love someone, and how we demonstrate that love through our actions rather than our words." I could see my family members shifting uncomfortably in their seats, but they had no idea what was coming. For 25 years, I've tried to show my love for my family through concrete actions. Through sacrifice, through generosity, through putting their needs and dreams before my own financial security and personal comfort. The room was completely silent now, guests sensing that something significant was about to be revealed. I've been blessed with a successful career that has allowed me to help the people I care about most. College educations, down payments on homes, business investments, medical expenses, legal fees, cars, vacations, and countless other ways I've tried to make their lives easier and more fulfilling. I paused, letting the anticipation build while Marcus's face began to drain of color. In total, I've spent over $2.5 million supporting my family over the past 25 years. Not because anyone demanded it, not because I was obligated to do it, but because I believe that's what unconditional love looks like. Gasps were starting to ripple through the crowd. $2.5 million was more money than most of the guests could imagine spending on anything, let alone family support. But recently, I learned something that fundamentally changed my understanding of these relationships and my role within this family. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small digital recorder, the kind I sometimes used for dictating notes on complex cases. 3 weeks ago, I accidentally overheard a conversation that revealed how my family really feels about me, about my generosity, and about the woman who has been subsidizing their lifestyles for over 2 decades. Marcus looked like he was about to be sick. Rebecca was crying silently. My parents were staring at their plates as if they could disappear through sheer force of will. I thought it might be educational for everyone here tonight to hear what they really think about their beloved benefactor. I pressed play, and my mother's voice filled the elegant gallery. "Oh honey, you know how she is. Still trying to buy our love because she couldn't keep a husband or have a normal family life. It's actually kind of pathetic when you think about it." The silence in the room was absolute. 200 people sat frozen, unable to process what they were hearing. Janet's voice came next. "At least she's useful. Where else would we find someone stupid enough to throw money at us without asking questions?" I saw several guests look shocked, then turn to stare at my family with expressions of disgust and disbelief. Rebecca's laugh echoed through the sound system. "Remember when she paid for my entire divorce? $45,000 in legal fees, just like that. She didn't even ask to see the bills or question why it was taking so long." But it was Michael's voice that created the most devastating impact. "Look guys, I know she's my mom, but let's be honest, if she wasn't loaded, would any of us really want to spend time with her? She's uptight, she's judgmental, she acts like her money makes her better than everyone else." The recording ended, and the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could see people throughout the crowd turning to whisper to each other, their expressions ranging from shock to horror to disgust. But I wasn't finished. "Now I'd like to share something else that I think you'll find interesting." I signaled to David Chun, who was positioned near the AV equipment, and suddenly a large screen descended behind me, displaying the comprehensive financial analysis Patricia Hernandez had prepared. Marcus Sterling, successful entrepreneur and proud father of the groom. Business assets, $1.2 million. Source of initial capital and ongoing support, $800,000 from his sister, documented over 18 years. Marcus was visibly shaking now, his face ashen as 200 people stared at him with expressions of shock and judgment. Rebecca Sterling Morrison, independent single mother and inspiration to divorced women everywhere. Current assets, $280,000. Source, $400,000 in divorce support and ongoing assistance from her sister. Rebecca was sobbing openly now, mascara streaming down her face as her friends and colleagues realized that her inspirational story of independence was built on a foundation of lies. Robert and Helen Sterling, financially independent retirees who are proud of never being a burden on their children. Home value, $420,000, purchased outright by their daughter. Additional support over 15 years, $180,000 for medical expenses, home maintenance, and living costs. My parents sat in stunned silence, unable to meet the eyes of their retirement community friends who were discovering that their comfortable lifestyle was entirely dependent on their daughter's generosity. And Michael Sterling, self-made attorney who represents the next generation of principled lawyers. Assets, $750,000 condo plus investments, all funded by his mother to the tune of over $500,000 in education, housing, and career support. Michael was white as paper, staring at the table while his law firm colleagues absorbed the reality that his reputation for financial independence was completely fabricated. So let me ask everyone here tonight, when you look at my family's success, their comfortable homes, their financial security, their ability to host elegant celebrations like this one, are you seeing the results of their hard work and sacrifice? Or are you seeing mine? The murmuring that had been building throughout the crowd suddenly stopped. The silence was so complete that I could hear the air conditioning system running. But here's the most important thing I want to share with you tonight, and especially with Tommy and Sarah as they begin their marriage. I paused, looking directly at the young couple who were staring at me with expressions of horror and confusion. As of this moment, I am officially retiring from the family business. All outstanding loans, and yes, much of this money was documented as loans, not gifts, totaling $837,000 are now due within 30 days. All ongoing financial support ends tonight. And my will has been changed to reflect my new understanding of family dynamics and loyalty. You could have heard a pin drop in that enormous gallery. My estate, currently valued at over $8 million, will now be donated entirely to organizations that help people escape financial abuse and manipulation. Because I've learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you are actually the ones who are destroying you. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is stop enabling destructive behavior. And sometimes the most loving act is to force people to face the consequences of their choices. I turned off the microphone and began walking back to my table, but Tommy's voice stopped me. Aunt Victoria, this is my wedding day. How could you do this here, in front of everyone we care about? I looked at my nephew, this young man whose entire celebration was built on my money, whose engagement party I'd funded, whose flowers and photography I'd paid for while he took credit for his family's generosity. Tommy, I'm giving you and Sarah the most valuable wedding gift you'll ever receive. I'm showing you what happens when family relationships become financial transactions instead of emotional connections. I'm demonstrating the importance of honesty, accountability, and genuine respect in any relationship that's meant to last. I gestured toward the crowd of stunned guests. Everyone here tonight has now seen the truth about your family's success and my role in creating it. They've heard how your father, your grandmother, your cousin, and your uncle really feel about the woman who made their comfortable lives possible. This is what manipulation looks like. This is what exploitation disguised as family love actually sounds like. Sarah was crying quietly, and I felt genuine sympathy for her. She hadn't asked to be caught in the middle of this family drama, and she didn't deserve to have her wedding day overshadowed by decades of dysfunction. Sarah, I'm truly sorry that your special day has been affected by this situation. But I hope you'll remember this moment if you ever find yourself being taken for granted or treated as a resource rather than a person. You deserve better than that, and so does Tommy if he's willing to learn from what he's witnessed here tonight. I picked up my purse and walked toward the exit, feeling 200 pairs of eyes following my every step. Just before I reached the door, I heard Michael's voice behind me. Mom, wait. Please. I turned around to see my son standing in the middle of the dance floor, tears streaming down his face, with the entire wedding reception watching our family's final act of public drama. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We all are. Please don't do this. We can fix this. We can be better. The room was dead silent, 200 people holding their breath as they watched a son desperately try to salvage a relationship with a mother he'd publicly humiliated and financially exploited for years. Michael, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the gallery, I spent 25 years trying to fix things for all of you. I fixed your financial problems, your career challenges, your housing situations, your educational needs. I fixed everything except the fundamental problem with our relationships. What problem? You never learned to value me for who I am rather than what I can do for you. You never developed the capacity to love someone without expecting them to prove their worth through constant sacrifice. You never understood that real relationships require mutual respect, not just one-sided generosity. The crowd was completely silent, absorbed in watching this family's dysfunction play out like a dramatic performance. Now it's time for you to learn how to fix things for yourselves. It's time for you to discover who you really are when you're not living off my money. It's time for you to find out whether you're capable of building genuine relationships based on character rather than financial benefit. And if we can't? If we fail? I looked at my son, my family, the 200 people who had witnessed the destruction of everything I'd built over 25 years, and felt a profound sense of peace about what I'd done. Then you'll have learned something important about the difference between conditional love and the real thing. And maybe, eventually, you'll be capable of offering someone the kind of unconditional support I gave to all of you. I walked out of the Chicago Cultural Center and into the evening air, leaving behind the people who had shaped and controlled my life for over 6 decades. For the first time since I was a young woman, my future was entirely my own. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my temporary apartment in London, looking out over the Thames while I reviewed the paperwork for my new position with the International Court of Justice. The opportunity had been offered to me 8 months earlier, but I declined because I couldn't imagine leaving my family behind. It's amazing how quickly perspective can change when you finally see the truth about your situation. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from various family members, and I'd been documenting their evolution from anger to bargaining to desperation. The progression was predictable, but still fascinating from a psychological standpoint. Marcus had tried every approach from rage to manipulation to legal threats. His business was failing without my ongoing support, and he was facing the reality that his success had always been dependent on resources he couldn't replace. His latest message was simply, "I'm going to lose everything. I hope you're satisfied." Rebecca's messages alternated between self-pity and anger. Her comfortable lifestyle was unsustainable without my support, and she was learning that single motherhood was considerably more challenging when you couldn't rely on a wealthy sister to cover emergencies and extras. Her most recent text, "Emma asks why Aunt Victoria doesn't love us anymore. What am I supposed to tell her?" My parents' messages were the most manipulative, trying every guilt trip and emotional appeal they could devise. They were facing the possibility of selling the house I'd bought them and moving to a smaller place they could actually afford on their fixed income. Mom's latest voicemail, "Victoria, I'm having chest pains from the stress. The doctor says my blood pressure is dangerously high. Is this really worth destroying your mother's health?" But Michael's messages were different, and they were the reason I hadn't completely closed the door on future reconciliation. His first dozen messages had been angry, desperate, entitled, everything I expected from someone who was finally facing consequences for the first time in his adult life. He'd threatened legal action, tried emotional manipulation, even suggested that I was having some kind of mental breakdown that required professional intervention. But gradually, over the weeks since Tommy's wedding, his tone had begun to change. His latest message was completely different from anything I'd received from him before. "Mom, I've been seeing a therapist who specializes in family financial dynamics and codependent relationships. I'm starting to understand how we got here, and more importantly, how I became the kind of person who could treat you the way I did. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I know I can't undo 25 years of taking you for granted. But I want you to know that I'm doing the work to become the kind of son you deserved from the beginning. I'm not asking for anything, not money, not a relationship, not even a response to this message. I just want you to know that I'm finally taking responsibility for who I became and trying to figure out how to be better." It was the first message from any of them that didn't ask for anything, that didn't try to manipulate my emotions, that simply acknowledged the reality of what had happened and took responsibility for it. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back a single word, "Good." It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't an invitation to rebuild our relationship. But it was acknowledgement that maybe, eventually, there might be a foundation for something genuine to grow between us. I closed my phone and walked out onto my balcony, looking over the city that was going to be my home for the next several years. Tomorrow I would begin work that actually mattered, cases that involved international justice and human rights, rather than the petty financial crimes and corporate disputes that had filled my previous career. For the first time in 25 years, every dollar I earned would be mine to spend as I chose. Every weekend would be free for activities I enjoyed rather than family obligations I dreaded. Every holiday would be peaceful rather than performative. I thought about Tommy and Sarah, hoping their marriage would survive the spectacle of their wedding day and that they'd learn something valuable about the difference between authentic love and conditional support. I thought about the other people at that reception who had witnessed the collapse of everything they thought they knew about successful families and generous relationships. Most of all, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 weeks earlier, desperate for love, willing to buy affection, convinced that my value as a person was tied to my usefulness as a financial resource. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own worth and refused to accept anything less than genuine respect and appreciation. The judge had finally ruled in her own favor, and the sentence was life lived entirely on her own terms, for the first time in 25 years. 6 months later, I received an unexpected email that changed everything I thought I knew about the impact of my decision. It came from Sarah, Tommy's wife, and the subject line simply read, "Thank you. Dear Judge Sterling," she wrote, "I know you probably don't want to hear from our family after everything that happened at our wedding, but I needed you to know how that day changed our lives, for the better. The first few weeks after the wedding were horrible. Tommy was angry, embarrassed, and defensive about what you'd revealed. He kept saying you'd ruined our special day and that family business should stay private. But as the shock wore off and we started really talking about what we'd witnessed, something important began to shift. Tommy started questioning things he'd never thought about before. Why had his college education been so easy when his friends struggled with debt? Why had his father's business success seemed so effortless compared to other entrepreneurs we knew? Why had he never wondered where the money came from for all the family celebrations and emergencies? More importantly, he started recognizing patterns in how his family treated you versus how they treated each other. He remembered years of family gatherings where you were expected to pick up every check, handle every crisis, and solve every problem while being treated like your contributions were somehow less valuable than everyone else's. We went to counseling together to work through the impact of that wedding day, and our therapist helped us understand that what we witnessed wasn't just family drama, it was a masterclass in financial abuse and emotional manipulation. She said that what you did took incredible courage, and that most people in your situation never find the strength to break free from those destructive patterns. Tommy has cut off contact with his father and the rest of the family. Not out of anger, but because he realized that he didn't want to become the kind of person who could treat someone like that. He started paying his own way for everything, even when it's difficult. He sold the engagement ring you'd paid for and bought me a smaller one with money he'd earned himself. It means more to me than the expensive one ever did. We've also started volunteering with an organization that helps people recognize and escape financial abuse in families. Tommy shares his story about growing up in a family that normalized exploitation, and I talk about what it was like to witness the truth being revealed so dramatically. We've helped 12 families recognize similar patterns in their own relationships. I wanted you to know that your decision to expose the truth, as painful as it was for everyone involved, probably saved my marriage and definitely saved Tommy from becoming like his father. We're building our life on honesty and mutual respect instead of entitlement and exploitation. We don't expect forgiveness or a relationship with you. We know that the damage done over 25 years can't be fixed with an apology or good intentions. But we wanted you to know that your courage to speak the truth is still creating positive change in the world. Thank you for showing us what real love looks like, love that's willing to endure being hated in order to force people to confront hard truths about themselves. With genuine gratitude and respect, Sarah and Tommy. I read the email 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief and validation. For months, I'd wondered if I'd been too harsh, if I'd destroyed relationships that might have been salvageable with a gentler approach. Sarah's words confirmed that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. 2 days later, I received another unexpected message, this one from someone I'd never met. Judge Sterling, my name is Jennifer Walsh, and I was a guest at your nephew's wedding. I'm a social worker who specializes in family therapy, and I wanted you to know that what I witnessed that night has fundamentally changed how I approach cases involving financial abuse within families. I've been working with families for 15 years, and I've seen countless situations where one family member's generosity enables destructive behavior in others. But I've never seen anyone find the courage to expose the truth so completely and effectively. Your presentation was like watching a perfectly executed intervention on a family-wide scale. Since that wedding, I've started using audio recordings and financial documentation in my practice to help clients recognize patterns they've been unable to see. 3 different families have used your approach, obviously in private therapy settings rather than public venues, to break free from decades of financial exploitation. One woman discovered that she'd been supporting her adult children's drug habits by paying their rent and expenses, allowing them to spend their own money on substances. Another realized that her financially struggling siblings had been living well above their means while she sacrificed her own retirement savings to bail them out of self-created crises. Your willingness to face public embarrassment in order to expose private truth has given other people permission to stop protecting family members from the consequences of their choices. I hope you know that your courage is creating ripple effects far beyond your own family situation. With professional admiration, Dr. Jennifer Walsh. Over the following months, I received dozens of similar messages from people who had been at the wedding, people they had told, and people who had heard the story secondhand. Apparently, my family's dramatic downfall had become something of a cautionary tale in Chicago social circles, but also an inspiration for people trapped in similar situations. A year after Tommy's wedding, I was established in my new life in London and deeply involved in international human rights cases that gave me a sense of purpose I'd never experienced before. My work focused on economic justice and the legal frameworks needed to protect vulnerable populations from financial exploitation, themes that had become personally meaningful in ways I could never have imagined. I had built new friendships based on shared interests and mutual respect rather than financial dependency. I was traveling to places I'd always wanted to see but had never prioritized while I was funding everyone else's dreams. I was learning French, taking art classes, and discovering parts of myself that had been dormant for decades. Most surprisingly, I was dating someone, a fellow judge named David Morrison who worked for the European Court of Human Rights. David knew my entire story, had read the media coverage of my family's wedding disaster, and admired what he called my judicial approach to personal justice. He was financially independent, emotionally mature, and genuinely interested in me as a person rather than as a resource. "You know," he said over dinner one evening, "what you did took the kind of courage that most people never develop in a lifetime. You chose truth over comfort, justice over enabling, and your own dignity over other people's convenience." "Some people think I was cruel," I replied, thinking about the various reactions I'd received over the past year. "Some people think judges are cruel when we sentence criminals to prison," he said with a smile. "But punishment serves a purpose. It creates consequences for harmful behavior, and it protects society from people who refuse to follow the rules. What you did was essentially the same thing, just in a family context rather than a legal one." That evening, as I sat in my London apartment reviewing case files for a major international trafficking case, my phone rang with a call from a Chicago area code I didn't recognize. "Judge Sterling? This is Dr. Amanda Chen at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about your son Michael Sterling. He's listed you as his emergency contact." My heart stopped. "Is he injured? What's happened?" "He's stable now, but he was brought in after a suicide attempt. He's asking to speak with you." The world tilted sideways. Whatever anger and disappointment I felt toward Michael, he was still my son, still the little boy I'd raised and loved before everything went wrong between us. "I'll be on the next flight to Chicago," I said without hesitation. 18 hours later, I was sitting beside Michael's hospital bed, looking at my son's pale face and the bandages on his wrists, feeling a complex mixture of love, guilt, anger, and profound sadness. "Mom," he whispered when he saw me. "You came." "Of course I came. You're my son." "I didn't think, after everything I did to you, everything I said." "Michael, what happened? Why did you do this?" He was quiet for a long time, staring at the ceiling while machines beeped around us. Finally, he spoke in a voice so quiet I had to lean forward to hear him. "I lost everything, Mom. My job, my condo, my reputation. When I couldn't pay back the money I owed you, my credit was destroyed. The law firm found out about the financial lies I'd been telling, and they fired me for misrepresenting my background. Other firms won't hire me because the story about our family is all over Chicago legal circles. I felt a stab of guilt, wondering if I'd pushed too hard, been too unforgiving. But that's not why I did this, he continued. I mean, losing everything was horrible, but I deserved those consequences. What broke me was finally understanding what I'd done to you. What do you mean? The therapist I've been seeing specializes in narcissistic family systems. She helped me understand that what we did to you wasn't just taking your money, it was stealing your sense of worth, your right to be loved for who you are rather than what you could provide. Tears were streaming down his face now. Mom, I spent 30 years believing that you owed me your support because you were my mother. I never questioned whether I was giving you anything in return. I never even wondered if you were happy or fulfilled or getting your own needs met. I saw you as a function rather than a person. I reached out and took his hand, feeling the bandages under my fingers. When I lost my job and my condo, when I had to move back into a studio apartment and take a job at a small firm making a third of what I used to earn, I finally experienced what it felt like to struggle. And I realized that you'd been supporting not just my lifestyle, but everyone else's, for 25 years while managing your own demanding career. Michael. Let me finish, Mom. Please. I need to say this. I nodded, squeezing his hand gently. The therapist asked me to calculate how many hours you must have worked to earn the money you spent on our family. Based on your salary and tax rate, you spent over 4,000 hours of your life, more than 2 full years of full-time work, earning money that you gave to us instead of using for your own happiness and security. The weight of that calculation hit me like a physical blow. I'd never thought about it in terms of time, in terms of the actual years of my life I devoted to their comfort. 4,000 hours, Mom. 2 years of your life. And what did we give you in return? Mockery, dismissal, and the assumption that your generosity was somehow pathetic instead of extraordinary. You were my family. I wanted to help you. No, Mom. We were your abusers. We exploited your love and generosity while convincing ourselves that we deserved it. We turned your kindness into a source of shame instead of recognizing it as the gift it was. Michael sat up in the hospital bed, looking directly at me for the first time since I'd arrived. I tried to kill myself because I finally understood what I'd done to the person who loved me most in the world. I couldn't live with knowing that I'd spent 30 years taking advantage of your goodness, while treating you like you were somehow beneath us. But you survived. You're here now. I survived because I realized that killing myself would just be one more way of hurting you. One more selfish act that would cause you pain while solving nothing. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us processing the weight of everything that had been said. What happens now? I asked finally. Now I do the work to become someone worthy of your love, even if I never get the chance to show you who that person is. I'm going to continue therapy, not to win you back, but to make sure I never treat anyone else the way I treated you. I'm going to rebuild my life based on my own efforts rather than other people's generosity. And I'm going to find ways to help other people recognize these patterns before they destroy their families like we destroyed ours. And what about us? What about our relationship? Michael looked at me with eyes that seemed older and sadder than they had just 2 days earlier. I don't have the right to ask for a relationship with you, Mom. I forfeited that right through 25 years of selfishness and ingratitude. But if you ever decide that you're willing to let me try to earn your respect and love instead of just expecting it, I'll be here doing the work to become someone who deserves those gifts. I stayed in Chicago for a week while Michael recovered and began an intensive outpatient therapy program. I met with his psychiatrist and therapist, and I was impressed by the depth of insight he was developing about family dynamics and emotional abuse. On my last day in the city, Michael asked if I would join him for one therapy session. I agreed, curious to see how he was processing everything we'd been through. Dr. Sarah Kim was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma and recovery from narcissistic abuse. She welcomed me warmly and thanked me for coming. Judge Sterling, Michael has been doing intensive work to understand his role in your family's dysfunction. Today, I'd like him to share with you what he's learned, not to ask for forgiveness, but to demonstrate his commitment to genuine change. Michael took a deep breath and began speaking in a voice that was steady but filled with emotion. Mom, I want to acknowledge specific ways that I harmed you, and I want to do it without making excuses or asking for anything in return. I exploited your generosity by treating your financial support as an entitlement rather than a gift. I allowed you to pay for my education, my housing, and my lifestyle while simultaneously mocking you for being controlling with your money. I lied to my colleagues and friends about the source of my success, taking credit for achievements that were only possible because of your sacrifices. I built my professional reputation on a foundation of deception about my family's wealth and my own independence. I participated in family conversations that mocked and diminished you, treating you as a source of entertainment rather than recognizing you as the person who made everyone's comfort possible. Most importantly, I failed to see you as a complete person with your own needs, dreams, and right to be valued for who you are rather than what you could provide. I'm not asking for forgiveness, because I don't think what I did is forgivable. I'm simply acknowledging the truth about my behavior and committing to becoming someone who would never treat anyone the way I treated you. Dr. Kim looked at me. Judge Sterling, how does it feel to hear Michael acknowledge these specific behaviors? It feels like the first honest conversation we've had in decades, I said. It also feels like the beginning of accountability rather than the end of consequences. What would need to happen for you to consider rebuilding a relationship with Michael? I thought carefully before answering. He would need to demonstrate, over a significant period of time, that he's capable of valuing me as a person rather than as a resource. He would need to build a life based on his own efforts rather than anyone else's support. And he would need to find ways to make amends that go beyond words, ways to help other people avoid the mistakes he made. Michael nodded. I understand. And I want you to know that I'm committed to doing those things whether or not it leads to a relationship between us. I need to become a better person for my own sake, not just to win back your love. 6 months later, I received an email from Michael with the subject line, 6 months of accountability. Mom, I wanted to update you on the work I've been doing, not to ask for anything, but to show you that I'm serious about changing who I am. I've been in therapy twice a week for 8 months now, focusing specifically on narcissistic behaviors and family trauma. I've learned to recognize the manipulation tactics I used without even realizing it, and I'm developing healthier ways to relate to people. I've been working at a small non-profit law firm that serves low-income families. My salary is about a quarter of what I used to make, but I'm learning what it feels like to work for something meaningful rather than just maximizing income. I live in a small apartment that I can afford on my own salary, and I've been learning to cook, clean, and manage my life without anyone else's support. Most importantly, I've started volunteering with an organization that helps families recognize financial abuse patterns. I share my story about growing up in a family that normalized exploitation, and I help other people see the warning signs that I missed for 30 years. I've helped 4 families recognize that one member was being financially exploited by the others. In each case, the generous family member was able to set boundaries and stop the abuse before it destroyed their financial security and self-worth. I'm not telling you this to impress you or to earn my way back into your life. I'm telling you because I want you to know that your decision to expose our family's dysfunction is still creating positive change in the world. The courage you showed that night at Tommy's wedding gave me the shock I needed to finally see the truth about who I'd become. I love you, Mom. Not because of what you can do for me, but because of who you are, a woman of incredible strength, intelligence and integrity who deserved better than what she got from her family. Whether or not we ever have a relationship again, please know that you raised a son who is finally learning to be worthy of the love you gave him. With respect and gratitude, Michael. I stared at that email for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Forgiveness would take much longer to develop, if it ever came at all. But recognition. Recognition that sometimes people can change, that sometimes consequences can lead to genuine growth rather than just resentment. A year later, I was back in Chicago for a conference on international human rights law. On impulse, I sent Michael a text asking if he'd like to have coffee. We met at a small cafe near his apartment, and I was struck by how different he looked. Older, certainly, but also more grounded somehow. Less polished than he used to be, but more genuine. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he said as we settled into a corner booth. I wanted to see how you were doing. Really doing. We talked for 2 hours, and for the first time in decades, I felt like I was having a conversation with someone who saw me as a person rather than as a resource. Michael asked about my work in London, my travels, my new relationship. He shared stories about his clients at the non-profit firm and the families he'd been helping through his volunteer work. Most importantly, he didn't ask for anything. Not money, not a return to our old relationship, not even forgiveness. He simply wanted to share his life with me and learn about mine. As I prepared to leave, Michael handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "It's the first payment toward the money I owe you. It's only $500, that's all I can afford right now on my non-profit salary. But I wanted you to know that I take my debt seriously, and I'm committed to paying back every penny over time." I looked at the check, remembering that his outstanding loans had totaled over $300,000. At $500 a month, it would take him 50 years to pay it all back. "Michael, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Not because you need the money, but because I need to take responsibility for what I took from you. This isn't about the money, Mom. It's about accountability." I took the envelope, not because I needed the money, but because I recognized that accepting it was important for his healing process. "I'm proud of who you're becoming," I said, and I meant it. "I'm trying to become someone you could be proud of. Someone who was worth all the sacrifice you made over the years." As I flew back to London that evening, I reflected on the long journey from that devastating night at Giovanni's restaurant to this tentative coffee conversation with my son. The woman who had discovered her family's betrayal 2 years earlier was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own worth and refused to accept anything less than genuine respect. The judge had delivered her verdict, enforced her sentence, and watched as justice slowly transformed into something that might eventually become redemption. Not for everyone. Marcus, Rebecca, and my parents had never shown any genuine remorse or effort to change. But for Michael and for me, the painful process of accountability had created the possibility of something real and healthy. Justice, it turned out, wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about creating space for people to become who they were meant to be, free from the destructive patterns that had defined their relationships for decades. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very patient, justice could even create the foundation for love to grow again, this time based on truth, respect, and genuine appreciation rather than need, obligation, and exploitation. The verdict was final, but the story was still being written. And for the first time in 25 years, I was excited to see what the next chapter would bring.